So I decided to do my historical analysis on the Insanity Defense Reform Act of 1984. So the insanity defense has been seen throughout history. The Romans actually believed that individuals who aren't competent shouldn't be blamed for their actions, and so they called this non compos mentis. And it's actually been seen in our common law. So common law was written before our court system. They actually took common law and equitable courts and they smushed them together, and that's kind of what we see in our court system today. So we use common law as precedents for cases that we see now, and it states that a guilty mind is actually needed to be convicted, so you have to have intent to actually be convicted. There's also a thing called the wild beast test that was used back in the day. They also have this thing called the McNaughton rule, which was actually because a man named Daniel McNaughton, he accidentally killed the prime minister because he believed that the prime minister wanted to kill him. So there's actually 3 parts to the rule itself, and it was implemented in the US. But the insanity defense is actually left up to the states to decide if they want to use the rulings of insanity. So currently there's 25 states that actually use the defense, while 4 states do, they just won't allow it. So those states are Kansas, Montana, Idaho, and Utah. So the spur of the reform actually happened because there was a man named John Hinckley. He actually shot and injured Ronald Reagan along with 3 other individuals. So the reason he did this was because he wanted to get Jodie Foster's attention and to notice him. If you don't know, Jodie Foster is a really famous actress. She played in things like The Silence of the Lambs. And he was just madly in love with her, and he said that their love was like Romeo and Juliet, so it was just pretty delusional. He was actually charged with 13 assault counts, murders, and weapons. And he used the insanity defense plea when he was brought to court. That's actually his mugshot in '81. But he was acquitted from all of his charges, which means that he wasn't, all the charges were just dropped. And so the media was really upset and gave it a negative outlook, and the public was just outraged because they thought that he took the easy way out. And they just wanted to see justice for the president getting injured. So this spurred the reform. The reform actually took place in 1984, so a couple years afterwards. So the reform itself is an affirmative defense to a prosecution under any federal statute that, at the time of the commission of the acts constituting the offense, the defendant, as a result of a severe mental disease or defect, was unable to appreciate the nature and quality of the wrongfulness of his acts. Mental disease or defect does not otherwise constitute a defense. So pretty much what that is stating is that the defendant was mentally ill at the time of the incident, which made the person unaware of what is right and wrong, so they shouldn't be held to the same standards as what a sane person would be. So because of the public's outrage, the government kind of came together and they decided to write 26 pieces of new legislation. So they wanted to just get rid of the insanity defense as a whole and just kind of start over with these pieces. But actually lawmakers really hate doing that because why would you don't want to get rid of something. It's a really big hassle, so instead of just scratching it and starting over, they settled on just doing a reform. So this reform did a couple of things. It threw out a bunch of the old defenses, but it kept ones like McNaughton and the right-wrong standard. And there was also a shift of the burden of proof. So in most cases, the burden of proof actually falls onto the prosecution. So they just have to prove all these things and lay out the evidence, while the defense kind of just pokes holes and creates doubt. So the insanity defense is actually put on the defense to say that they have to prove that their client is actually mentally ill. Along with this, it established a procedure on the federal level for how to commit a defendant found not guilty under the plea instead of just being acquitted for all the charges. So it was something that the court kind of just had to regulate all around. So looking at the insanity defense now, it's actually really not used that often. Out of 10% of cases that use it, only 1% are successful in getting this defense. But however, there are other defenses that have been added. These would include guilty but mentally ill, along with the mens rea defense. And it's actually starting to help people to receive treatment. So they're getting people placed in mental health facilities rather than just in prisons. Because a lot of people actually think that going to a mental health care facility is like taking the easy way out, or if they would spend less time in a mental care facility rather than going to jail. So like if a person is presented with, oh, go to 6 years in prison or go to like a mental health care facility, they think that, oh, if I go there, it's only going to be a year long. When actually that's not the case. And I think that's really important for citizens to know, because we as people we get called for jury duty. So maybe if people are more aware of this, then that 1% would actually grow to know that it's not taking the easy way out. These people actually do need help. And Hinckley is a really good example of this. So he's been receiving treatment. That picture is of him before and after. So he's actually been in a mental rehabilitation center for 30 years. He was released in 2016, but he's still getting treatment. So he's considered an outpatient receiving treatment for a major depression and a psychotic disorder that wasn't clearly specified. So just to summarize a little bit, the reform was actually really important, and it aided to format a defense for individuals who actually need help. However, because of the Hinckley case, there was a negative outlook from society, and we can still kind of see that today. But hopefully with the emergence of these other defenses evolving, maybe the stigma will change and there'll be more compassion towards the mentally ill. Any questions?
Could you explain the guilty but mentally ill?
It pretty much just means that you state that you are guilty, so you take the charges, but you get placed in a mental care facility.
So like maybe you knew what you were doing, but there's like another, say you were depressed, and you're also depressed or something like that, so there's like a minor mental illness. Is that kind of what you mean by that? Or?
That's kind of what I got from it, but I'm not entirely sure.
Do you think this has had more of a benefit as a whole for the field of psychology, trying to like have its own field or not? Do you think there's been more stigma attached to it?
I think it's starting to help, but I think more awareness needs to be raised for it to like really take off.
How can we do that awareness?
I think just doing stuff like this, just getting the word out. I don't really know any other. I'm sure there's better ways.